Hi everyone, so today we're going to talk about proteins. Proteins are necessary for us, and we're going to look today at the functions of proteins, why they're important for our body, and also where can we find proteins, what should we eat so that we can ensure that we are taking care of our body and having the right nutrients that it needs. Let's start off with where can you find proteins. Proteins are found in cheese, milk, beans, meat, fish, and those are only a few things that contains proteins. Later on in the lesson, I'll ask you to do some more research if you can find other foods that contain proteins. Um, when we're talking about proteins, it is a little bit different from carbohydrates in a way that proteins, well, let's talk about the similarity first. The similarity is that both of them contain hydrogen, both of them contain carbon, both of them contains oxygen. So H-Y-T-R-O-G, and carbon C-A-R-B-O-N, oxygen O-X-Y-G-E-N. So O represents oxygen, C represents carbon, H represents hydrogen. But there's also another element that is found in proteins, and that is nitrogen. N-I-T-R-O-G-E-N. Nitrogen. There's also an additional R group, but we're not really going to look at the R group too much in detail. But just know that protein contains carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, and nitrogen. So what do proteins do for us? Proteins are so diverse in their function. Diverse means there's such a wide range of things that proteins do for us. So you might have to list a number of things when I ask you the functions of proteins. First of all, proteins help with our hair and nails. And in other organisms, it helps with their claws, wool, feathers, scale, horns, hooves, and so forth. So if you're looking at the trend of what proteins do, is that they are building very strong structural things for a living organism. Because scales and feathers and hooves, they all serve as a protection, as a way of protecting the organism. And it helps to apart from helping to protect the organism, it is there so it can resist a lot of environmental conditions. So proteins help with that. Proteins are also found in our muscle. Every time you're moving your muscles are being built, also requires proteins. Proteins help as cellular messengers. Cellular messenger means that it communicates within the cell. A protein from one cell will communicate with a protein from another, and that's how cells communicate. And they help with antibodies. Antibodies are needed for protection. Anytime an organism comes into our body, they're attacked by the antibodies so that we can protect the body from any type of diseases. Our blood contains proteins. There is something called hemoglobin that binds to oxygen and carries carry oxygen from one place to the next, so it helps with that. It helps with our brain and nerves to channel or signal or send things from one place to the next. Enzymes. It helps now. Enzymes is, I'm sure it's a new word to some of you. Enzymes are basically there to speed up chemical reactions. Now, reaction happens all over the place, from whether it's outside of our body or inside of our body. But inside of our body, we use something called enzyme, which is made of proteins, of course, to speed up these reactions. So instead of waiting for 3 or 4 days for something to digest, our body can basically do that in a few hours. And they help as cellular construction. Whenever something is damaged and need repair, proteins does this for us. They repair and build things. So if you have a cut or you have a scrape, proteins will go there and they will tend to repair that for you. So if I were to list all the functions of proteins, I don't think I can because there's such a wide array of them. I will just ask you for a few. And the main thing that I want from you is to know that right now is that they help with enzyme building, um, hair and nails, blood, they communicate, so you can use cellular messenger, and muscles. Later on, we're going to look at other functions when we get there. So I mentioned before that proteins are made up of nitrogen and carbon and oxygen and hydrogen. But these things or units, I'm going to draw a circle instead of putting those formula because it involves too much chemistry and too much difficulty for you. So this circle that I'm going to use, I'm going to call that an amino acid. So a protein is made of, the basic building block of proteins are amino acid. If I join two amino acids together, or three amino acids, I'm basically forming here a chain called a polypeptide. And in the carbohydrates lesson, you remember we were talking about when units come together, they form polymers. Similarly, this is a polymer of protein, meaning making up of amino acid. So between these, and I'm going to look at this diagram here because it's such a better drawing about it. These things here, where they're joined, are called peptide bonds. So amino acid forms peptide bonds. So this amino acid will combine with this amino acid. Here is a peptide bond. When many amino acids combine together, it forms a polypeptide. So if someone is to ask you what is the basic building block of proteins, you're going to say amino acid. If they ask you what are the amino acids joined by, you're going to say a peptide bond. When many amino acids come together, what do they form? A polypeptide. And that is as far as I will go into the structure of proteins. So proteins are, again, very different from carbohydrates in a number of ways. And one of them is that if I have an amino acid in a chain to form a polypeptide, this protein shape that I have here determines the protein function. So let's say, for example, and just to differentiate, I have 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 amino acids. It will do a specific job. If I were to rearrange this and say 2 goes there, 1 goes there, 3 goes here, and 4 goes there, the job cannot be done. So proteins are specific. They do a particular thing, and the moment you rearrange the amino acid or you break the chains between them, anything you do to them that influence their shape, they will stop functioning. They will stop doing what they do. So again, proteins, these chains, or the polypeptide arrangement needs to be intact before the protein works. So what is one thing that affects or changes the shape of proteins? Temperature. Temperature is known as something that if we have a polypeptide here, it will break the peptide bonds. And once it breaks the peptide bonds, the protein loses its function. So if we have an enzyme that is working, and when we apply heat to this enzyme, eventually the enzyme will stop working because the bonds are broken. So let's look at this example. Here we have a graph, and the temperature is 30, 40. When the temperature is 40 degrees Celsius, the proteins work the best because that is the highest point of the graph. So this enzyme will work its best at 40. If we drop or we increase the temperature to 60, it would not work. If we drop the temperature to 0 degrees Celsius, again, it will not work. So again, temperature affects the function of the protein because if it changes its shape, the protein will not work. The temperature at which proteins will work its best is called the optimum temperature. Another thing that affects proteins are pH, or is pH. pH, I mentioned this in a very first lesson when we were talking about pH is the measured amount of hydrogen. If we increase, for example, this is a protein called pepsin and another one called trypsin. Now, trypsin works best at pH 2 because that's where the optimum pH is. Pepsin, that is, and trypsin works best at pH 8. And that's the optimum temperature of trypsin. So if I were to put pepsin in an environment with pH 8, it will not work. And if I were to take trypsin and put it into a lower pH of 3 or 2, it will not work. Again, I have to reiterate this as many times as possible that proteins are specific. You change the temperature or pH, it breaks the bond, the protein changes its shape, and it would not work. Finally, or on our final minute before I end this video, where is it that you could find our protein being synthesized? The organelle called the ribosomes. And this should be a review for you, nothing new. In our cells, these dots that are found next to the endoplasmic reticulum, these dots are our ribosomes, and they tend to synthesize or to make proteins. Synthesize or synthesis means to make, so they make proteins.